In the dead of winter, as the first flakes of a brutal snowstorm began to whirl like angry spirits across the rural roads of upstate New York, a young family of four found themselves trapped in a nightmare they never saw coming. The wind howled like a beast, visibility dropped to zero, and their old SUV skidded off the icy highway into a ditch, engine sputtering to a halt. Inside, Sarah clutched her two children, 8-year-old Timmy and 5-year-old Lily, while her husband Mark frantically tried the ignition again and again. "We're stuck," he muttered, his voice cracking with fear. Little did they know, just a mile down that forsaken road, an elderly black woman named Mabel Johnson was peering out her frost-laced window, her heart stirring with an inexplicable pull to step into the storm. This is the story of how one act of kindness in the face of nature's fury forever altered the lives of strangers, proving that even in the coldest darkness, warmth can ignite a chain of miracles. Mabel Johnson had lived alone in her modest cabin on the outskirts of Willow Creek for over 2 decades, ever since her husband, Elijah, passed away from a sudden heart attack. At 78 years old, her days were filled with quiet routines, tending to her small garden in the warmer months, knitting scarves for the local shelter, and sipping chamomile tea by the fire while reminiscing about the life she once shared with Elijah. They had no children of their own, a sorrow that Mabel carried like a hidden scar, but she found solace in her faith and the occasional visits from neighbors. Her skin, weathered by years of hard work as a schoolteacher in a segregated South before moving north, told stories of resilience. Mabel had faced discrimination, loss, and isolation, but her spirit remained unbroken, guided by the simple belief that kindness is the light we pass on when our own flickers low. On that fateful evening, as the snow piled up against her door, she bundled up in her thick wool coat, grabbed a lantern, and ventured out, driven by a whisper in her soul that someone needed help. Meanwhile, the Thompson family was unraveling in the frozen confines of their vehicle. Mark, a 35-year-old accountant from the city, had insisted on driving through the forecasted storm to reach his parents' house for Christmas. "It's just a little snow," he'd said dismissively to Sarah that morning, ignoring the weather alerts blaring on the radio. Now regret gnawed at him as he watched his family's faces pale with cold and fear. Sarah, a nurse who had seen her share of emergencies, tried to stay calm for the kids, wrapping them in whatever blankets they had. Timmy whimpered about being hungry while Lily clung to her stuffed bear, tears freezing on her cheeks. They were white-collar folks from suburbia, unaccustomed to rural hardships, and in their panic, old biases subtly surfaced. Mark muttered about these backwoods towns and how no one would come to their aid. Their cell phones had no signal, the battery was dying, and the temperature inside the car plummeted. Hypothermia was a real threat, and as the hours ticked by, hope began to fade. It was then that Mabel appeared like a guardian angel through the swirling white veil. Her lantern's glow cut through the blizzard, and she rapped on the window, her voice steady despite the gale. "Y'all all right in there? Come on, my cabin's not far, can't leave you out here to freeze." Mark hesitated at first, his urban caution kicking in. Who was this stranger? But Sarah, seeing the genuine concern in Mabel's eyes, urged him to accept. With Mabel's guidance, they trudged through the knee-deep snow, carrying the children on their backs. The walk felt eternal, the wind biting at their exposed skin, but Mabel's encouraging words kept them moving. "One step at a time, folks. The Lord didn't bring you this far to abandon you now." Arriving at the cabin, the family was enveloped in warmth that went beyond the crackling fireplace. Mabel's home was humble but inviting, with faded photographs on the walls, a pot of stew simmering on the stove, and the scent of fresh-baked cornbread wafting through the air. She quickly set to work, wrapping the children in quilts she had sewn herself, brewing hot cocoa, and serving bowls of hearty vegetable stew. "Eat up, dears," she said softly to Timmy and Lily, who stared at her with wide eyes, unaccustomed to such immediate hospitality from someone so different from them. Sarah helped Mabel in the kitchen, sharing stories of her exhausting shifts at the hospital, while Mark paced by the window, worrying about their car and the storm's duration. As the night deepened, the power flickered out, plunging them into candlelit intimacy, forcing conversations that peeled back layers of their lives. Emotional depths began to surface as the group huddled together. Mabel shared her own tales of hardship, growing up in the Jim Crow South where she had to walk miles to a one-room schoolhouse, facing slurs and barriers that tested her resolve. She spoke of Elijah, how they met at a civil rights march in the 1960s, their love a quiet rebellion against a divided world. "We didn't have much, but we had each other," she said, her voice trembling with nostalgia. The Thompsons listened, riveted. Sarah opened up about her own struggles, the miscarriage she suffered last year, the strain it put on their marriage, and how the holidays amplified her grief. Mark admitted his fears of failure as a provider, especially after a recent job layoff he hadn't told anyone about. The children, sensing the vulnerability, shared innocent fears, Timmy about bullies at school, Lily about monsters under the bed. Mabel, with her teacher's wisdom, offered gentle advice drawing from her experiences. "Pain is like this storm," she told them. "It rages fierce, but it passes, and what remains is stronger ground." But challenges arose, testing the fragile bond forming in the cabin. The storm intensified overnight, winds rattling the windows like furious knocks and snowdrifts blocking the door. Mark's anxiety peaked when he realized their car might be buried beyond repair, and in a moment of frustration he snapped at Mabel, questioning why she lived so isolated. "Don't you get lonely out here? No family, no one to help." His words stung, laced with unintended prejudice born from his own insecurities. Mabel paused, her eyes glistening, but instead of retreating, she responded with grace. "Loneliness is a choice we make when we close our hearts. I've lost much, but I've gained more by opening my door." Sarah intervened, apologizing for her husband, and the tension eased as Mark reflected on his outburst, realizing how his privileged life had blinded him to others' quiet strengths. As dawn broke on the second day, the storm showed no signs of letting up, forcing deeper connections. Mabel taught the children old folk songs from her childhood, her voice rich and soulful, filling the cabin with melody. Timmy, usually shy, joined in, his laughter a balm for everyone's spirits. Lily curled up in Mabel's lap, listening to stories of brave women like Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, igniting a spark of curiosity in the young girl. Sarah and Mabel bonded over shared losses, Sarah's miscarriage mirroring Mabel's infertility, and they cried together, finding catharsis in mutual understanding. Mark, humbled, helped Mabel chop wood from her indoor stack and fix a leaky roof patch, his hands blistering but his heart softening. Through these acts, prejudices melted away. The family saw Mabel not as different, but as a beacon of humanity. The third day, a key challenge emerged. Lily fell ill with a fever, likely from the initial exposure. Panic set in as the child's temperature rose, and with roads impassable, medical help was unreachable. Mabel, drawing from her years of caring for sick students, sprang into action. She brewed a herbal tea from her pantry, ginger, honey, and elderberry, recalling remedies passed down from her grandmother. "This'll bring the fever down, sweet one," she assured, holding Lily close and singing lullabies. Sarah, the nurse, was impressed by Mabel's knowledge, and together they monitored the girl through the night. Mark prayed silently, confronting his skepticism about faith, while Timmy held his sister's hand, whispering encouragements. By morning, Lily's fever broke, her color returning, and the family breathed collective relief. This ordeal forged an unbreakable trust. The Thompsons realized Mabel wasn't just a helper, she was a lifesaver. As the storm finally began to wane on the fourth day, blue skies peeking through the clouds, resolutions unfolded. Neighbors with snowplows arrived, having heard from Mabel's radio calls before the power outage. The Thompsons' car was towed and repaired, but before leaving they promised to stay in touch. Mark, transformed, hugged Mabel tightly. "You've shown us what real strength looks like," he said, tears in his eyes. Sarah exchanged numbers, vowing to visit. The children gave Mabel drawings they made during the downtime, crude sketches of her as a superhero in the snow. But the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, the Thompsons couldn't shake the impact of Mabel's kindness. They shared their experience on social media, a viral post detailing the angel in the storm who saved them. Donations poured in from strangers moved by the tale, enough to renovate Mabel's cabin with modern amenities, a new roof, insulation, and even a small greenhouse for her garden. More profoundly, the family returned regularly, becoming the kin Mabel never had. Sarah helped Mabel navigate doctor's appointments, Mark assisted with finances, and the children called her Grandma Mabel, filling her home with laughter during holidays. Mabel, who had resigned to a quiet end, found renewed purpose. She started volunteering at the local community center, teaching history classes that bridged racial divides. Years later, as Mabel celebrated her 85th birthday surrounded by the Thompsons and new friends, she reflected on that snowy night. Kindness, she realized, wasn't just a gift given, it was a seed that grew into forests of change. Her life, once shadowed by loss, bloomed with love and connection, proving that one open door can rewrite destinies. And there you have it, folks, an incredible, true-inspired tale of how compassion in the midst of chaos can transform lives forever. If this story touched your heart like it did mine, hit that like button to spread the warmth, and subscribe to the channel for more uplifting stories that remind us of the power of humanity. Your support keeps these narratives alive. Let's build a community of kindness together.